We'll see where the conversation takes us. Yeah?
Totally. Yeah.
Because I'll tell you that I saw one of your videos. I think it was the childhood trauma one, and I watched that. But then I kind of noticed like your niche area within YouTube is like men's activist kind of stuff. I don't know. How would you describe like your area of the YouTube game?
I really started doing men's activism, advocating for men. But also, I would just say I just generally push the boundaries and obviously talk about mental health as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I just say what is important to me to
Yeah.
say.
No, and that's good because like I noticed a lot of your stuff is like, more about real, more about reality, more about things that a lot of people probably don't talk about, people shy away from.
Yeah, the hard things to say.
Yeah, they're definitely hard things to say. And like I said, it's like a niche area. And dare I say, it's probably one of the harder areas to grow within the whole YouTube game, right?
Yeah, it's tough.
So I got onto your childhood trauma one only because I work in an area where childhood trauma is very real, right? So I work in community corrections here in New South Wales.
Wow.
So the guys that we work with, we deal with every day, there is a
Mm-hmm.
sense of, their actions, their behavior stemming from their childhood trauma, right?
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people don't want to um, talk about that because they're adults, right? Because, like, I'll give you one example. Me and my friend at work were discussing this, where we had a client who gave birth, and it said that the baby was withdrawing, right? Because she had been using quite a
Mm-hmm.
lot of illicit drugs while she was having this
Yeah.
child, and upon birth, it was withdrawing from whatever drug it was that she was taking.
Mm-hmm.
And we said, well, geez, this kid just doesn't have a chance, right? Like it started 10 steps behind everyone else. And it's interesting to
Yep.
see that that childhood trauma already started for this child.
Yeah.
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 Like how do you see childhood trauma kind of affecting people long term, and what's your take on how that affects a person into their adulthood?
That's such a huge question. Um, and it's like, it's just the type of thing you could talk about forever
Yeah.
because there's not one aspect of your life that it affects. But I think a lot of people don't even realize that the reason that they have problems in their relationships or they act out in certain ways stems from unresolved issues from their childhood. I think one of the I don't know how I got to a point where I knew, I behaved in certain ways or certain things were ticking over in my head differently than other people because of my childhood trauma. Which, when I realized that was what was going on, I was able to combat it. And I don't really know how I did that,
Mm.
but I think a lot of people don't even realize, oh, this isn't normal. Like, this
Yeah.
isn't a appropriate way to respond to this behavior.
Yep.
Um, and I think that just, it affects their career, it affects their relationships, and not just like romantic relationships, friends,
Mm-hmm.
family,
Yep.
and like, which is really sad because if you have experienced childhood trauma, probably the biggest thing that you need is like tender loving care.
Mm.
You need those connections, you need those relationships, but like, especially if you're not talking about it, because as adults, a lot of adults don't ever talk about the fact
Yep.
they're abused as a
Yep.
child. No one's ever going to understand, oh, this behavior is coming from this awful thing that happened to them. But if
Mm.
you're not talking about that, how is anyone ever going to empathize?
Yep.
Empathize with that. It's such a sticky, twisted web.
Yeah. And there's so many facets to it as well, right? Because like you said, I think not everyone realizes that they've gone through trauma which has turned them into the person that they are today, right?
Yeah.
Not a lot of people do that self-reflection and then come to terms with the fact that, oh, I was abused or something did happen that has now created this behavior in me, this habit in me, right?
Mm-hmm.
When did you think Or how did you think you came about to realize, it is because of that trauma, it is because of what I experienced as a child or whatever? How do you think you came to that?
I probably think probably wasn't one thing. As I said, I haven't ever asked myself this question until right now when we're talking about how did I have that realization.
Yeah.
But I think probably there was more than one thing. I know that I experienced childhood trauma, and then there was a very short period of homelessness, and then I went and lived with my aunt, who was the kindest, most loving, my aunt and uncle, kindest, most loving. If you could picture the epitome,
Yeah.
like the pinnacle of a happy home,
Yeah.
that's where I went. So it was like such a stark difference.
Mm-hmm.
So that was when I realized that things that I had been through
Yeah.
weren't just not okay, they were like wildly wrong.
Yeah.
So that was like, but then I think I just naturally am quite an analytical person.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
I don't know, I'm quite an analytical person. I'm always thinking about what goes,
because it does require a lot of like self-reflection, right, to get to that point.
Oh my god, man, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you don't wake up one day and be like, oh yeah, it's because of that child trauma that I am the way I am today. It does take a lot of, and a lot of people, like the people that I deal with within the criminal justice system, like it's so chaotic for them, right? They're either on illicit drugs, it's their childhood trauma has brought on mental health issues. So it's like all these chaos around them doesn't allow them the luxury of doing that reflection.
Yeah. And that's probably that's why I brought up that I went to like this kind, loving, wholesome environment, because it's exactly that which allowed me to stop and think for a second. And I was only there 6 months, but I often think about that time and think just like, it was like a weight was lifted off my chest. It was like I was talking to my aunt about it recently, actually, and I said it was like coming up for air. It's like I'd been drowning, and it was like I took my first breath.
Yeah.
In however many years, 19.
That's amazing, isn't it? Like after so many years, you kind of feel like I've just breathed for the first time.
Exactly what it was like. Yeah.
Yeah. And the thing with childhood trauma too is like it's a spectrum, right? Because I've always thought that childhood trauma is real to every individual person that feels it, right? For one person, childhood trauma could be just, and I use this word loosely for lack of a better word, as simple as, their parents working, a lot and not being there for them, not feeling loved. They may have lived in a nice home and everything else, but their trauma was that their parents weren't there for them and they needed that. And the spectrum is from that to the extreme, which is, obviously drug use in the household, domestic violence, alcohol abuse and all that stuff. But I think it's important to appreciate that people's childhood trauma it spans the spectrum. It's not just straight away sexual abuse, physical abuse. It's also the low end stuff as well.
Yeah, especially because you're a child, so you're developing. It's hard to do like, well, they've got a life and they've got things, but as a child, you don't really, you haven't learnt those to think about, process things in that way. So it's hard as a child not to be like, they're not here, they don't love me. Like it's hard not to think like that as a child.
Yeah, exactly. It's only when you get to an adult that you kind of can put some rationale to it, some logic to it. But sometimes by the time you get to adulthood, it's a little bit, I wouldn't say it's too late, because I don't think it's ever too late. But the damage, is kind of done. And that person would have to do a lot of work on themselves. Yeah. It's, like I have this, I wouldn't say an ongoing battle, but this is ongoing discussion within the criminal justice system about when you come across someone that's done something really heinous and really horrible, like, abuse a child or child sex offender or something like that. A lot of people take the approach that there's no excuse. And of course there's no excuse, right? There's no excuse to do that stuff. But you can at least understand Why? And that actually sounds horrible. Not understand why, but because you get to know these people, and then they say, "Oh, I was abused too as a child. I grew up in a broken home. I was fostered out. I was abused by my foster parents. I was sexually abused by them as well." And they grow up with these horrible norms in their head that that's okay, and then they go out and they offend and they touch other kids or they assault other kids, right? And it's like, I'm not excusing what they're doing, but I've understand that this is their trauma. Like this happened to them, and we can't discount that.
Yeah, because if you want to understand why that behavior is occurring,
Mm.
then now you need to understand their backstory and how they got to this point, because nobody wakes up after that. Well, I can't imagine one day and be like, I've had such a loving, wonderful life. I'm going to go and abuse some people now. Like,
Yeah.
we can't do that.
Yeah. A lot of the times, like I said, we deal with all these guys who have an immense amount of childhood trauma. And I think you see it a lot within the criminal justice system anyway.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes it's very unfortunate because we take a very punitive approach. Like, we're here to punish them, but we don't consider what they've been through. And I've said in the past that when it comes to children, right, babies, that go through childhood trauma, that they're in docs or, family foster care because their parents were no good or whatever. We look at those children and we say, poor things, poor darlings, how horrible it is for them, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then these people become adults. And then we stop feeling sorry for them.
Mm-hmm.
But they're just adult versions of a hurt child. And it's weird that we have that mentality where we shift and all of a sudden we care less for them.
I understand where you're coming from, and I totally see the thought pattern. But, as an adult, now you're responsible for yourself, right? And, okay, you get to a shit situation and you've been put in that shit situation by other people. There is nothing that stops you from seeking help from, especially if you live in Australia. Like if you live in, a third world country, completely different. If you're in Ukraine right now, completely different scenario. But if you live in Australia, there are support systems, there are support networks set up by the government, set up by, charities. It's not like you can't find a way out. It's not like there aren't avenues out of those situations. And as an adult, it's your responsibility to look after yourself. As a child, I think to compare the way that you view a child who's hurting, who doesn't have the capacity, as we were talking about before, to think these thoughts through, or doesn't even have autonomy over their own life because somebody else makes the decisions about a child's life. A child doesn't make the decisions about a child's life. An adult makes the decisions about their life. And so while I have a lot of empathy for whatever pain they went through, it's like, and I know a lot of people who have struggled with the law. I know a lot of people who have struggled with drugs and abuse and all of these things. And I don't see one, I'm quite good friends with a lot of people like that, but they don't say, for me, I had a hard life. They say, how am I going to be better tomorrow? I don't want to be this person forever. What can I do about it? How can I fix it? And, they haven't come from the best backgrounds. They haven't come from the best homes. They haven't had the best support systems. But as an adult, it's your responsibility to make those choices to put yourself in a better situation. And, it doesn't matter to me particularly when you do that. If you do it today, if you do it tomorrow, if you do it 6 months from now, just get there. And everybody moves at their own pace, but you can't compare an adult making a mistake to a child making a mistake. It's not comparable.
Yeah, well, I think, as we look at adult offenders, for example, and we have less sympathy for them. But I also feel like a lot of people, they say when you experience a significant amount of trauma, you get trapped and there's a sense of arrested development there. Like you kind of stop. You're stunted, right? Mentally, you're stunted. So I think there's those people out there too that just, for whatever reason, their brain just stopped developing at the age of 15, and they go on to be adults. But look, we all should be taking responsible for our own actions, definitely. And I agree with you in the sense that we're all on our own journey. You know, we all have our own goals, and there's no time limit to this. I mean, there's a time limit, death, but everyone's on their own journey, and they're you get there when you get there, as long as you continue to try to get there. That's all that matters.
I agree, 100%. Like I said, if you get there tomorrow, if you get there next year, I'm going to be proud of you when you get there. Cheering you on from the sidelines.
Yeah. Now, apart from childhood trauma, I knew that you'd probably have a take on this current event, the Johnny Depp and Amber Heard. So we're just going to go left field and talk about that, because I know that, you're very men's activist and everything else, men's rights and all that stuff. Now, I want your take on what's happening at the moment, and, the fact that it's kind of shining a light on males also being able to be a victim of domestic violence as well.
It certainly is shining a light on that. I mean, this has been in the news for years now. It's been around for years. It's just coming up again. Obviously, maybe he's suing her for defamation. But I remember when it first came out. I don't know. This is just the headlines that I was seeing at the time. It was very anti-Johnny Depp. It was very.
It was.
Makes sense. You just seems a bit creepy. Things like that is what I was seeing. I remember just being like, well, I don't know. And with any situation of abuse allegations, so be like, well, I don't know because I wasn't there. So let's see what I can find out. So I went and listened to the audio tapes that came out years ago.
Oh wow, okay. So you were deep. You were deep into years ago.
I've always cared about men's or just abuse deep.
Yeah.
It's not, for me, it's not whether you're a man or a woman thing. It's who's been hurt here, who support here. So I went and listened to the audio tapes years ago, and just listening to those, it was just so clear to me back then. Okay, I don't have the full story, but either this abuse is from Amber Heard to Johnny Depp, or it's going both ways. Because it's here in the audio tapes, this is what's coming from Amber Heard here. This is emotional abuse. It's mental abuse, it's psychological abuse, and yes, they were talking about physical abuse as well. So it's and it's that evidence was there years ago, and it wasn't real. That wasn't really how it was being talked about, despite the audio tapes coming out years ago. And it's if those audio tapes, I really genuinely believe this, if the genders had been reversed, that would have been because it came out it wasn't that far away from the Me Too movement happening. So if had been, the genders had been reversed, those audio tapes would have been clipped and shared, and everything would have been on everybody's timeline. Everyone would have been seeing them.
Yeah.
But I had to go looking for them because all I was seeing was the headlines about Johnny Depp is an abuser.
Yeah, that was the narrative many years ago. Yeah, definitely.
Now I still see I do still see mainstream media outlets painting it in Johnny Depp has been accused of abusing Amber Heard, and he's suing her for defamation because allegedly he thinks. So it's still kind of going in this narrative, but the reaction that I see outside of mainstream media and from people online is okay, well, she abused him. The comments that I see and what people are sharing, it might just be the algorithm for me, I'm aware too, because it's going to know from what I talk about, what I like, what I share, that's what I want to see.
Yeah.
But it has been really uplifting to see a lot of people. And I think there's a petition now for Amber Heard to be removed from, not that I necessarily support this, but be removed from Aquaman because of the allegations with her.
Yeah.
And it's got 2 million signatures.
Right, okay.
So I'm well, we're starting to talk about this now, and we're starting to see, yes, man, even Johnny Depp, huge megastar, can be a victim of abuse.
And I wonder if he would have come out anyway if it wasn't for the the apparent hit piece that she put out many years ago, not actually
Mm.
naming him as the abuser, but she said that she was, you know,
I mean,
a
everyone
victim
knew.
of domestic violence.
Yeah,
Like, I wonder
everyone-
if she hadn't written that, I wonder if Johnny Depp would have come out and sued her for defamation, or even made a point that he was a victim of domestic violence. Like,
I
because a
think
lot of
he
men
was.
don't, right?
Yeah. Well, I think he was trying to some extent. Like, obviously, he denied the accusations when it originally happened, but him filing a defamation case is obviously such a bigger point, such a bigger statement to make. And I think you're right. Like, if she hadn't have written that article that he
Mm.
could actually sue her for, would he have made a big deal over
Yeah.
it? And it's like, I want the answer to be yes, because I actually think this is so important. Because for the same reason that it's important for women to come forward and say, I
Yeah.
was a victim of abuse, that's exactly the reason it's important for men.
Mm.
And if anything, I'm just glad that, like, because women have role models in this sense of strong women who came forward and talked about what happened to them.
Mm.
And I'm not saying that in a degrading way at all. I'm like, and it's great. And you look at those women talking about their harrowing experiences, and you draw strength from them.
Mm.
And it's like, men need that.
Yep.
Men who have been abused by their partners need a male role model sitting up there on the stand saying, I was abused.
Yep.
I, Johnny Depp, beloved by everyone because I played Captain Jack Sparrow, was abused by beautiful my beautiful wife.
Mm.
It looked picture perfect on the outside, and on the inside it was wrong.
Yeah. And I agree with you. Yeah. I mean, I didn't think about it that way, that men kind of needed a strong role model so that they can then start coming forward, because
Yeah, yeah.
the perception in society is that, well, you're a man, you shouldn't, you don't need to, you don't want to seem weak, or there's a sense of pride there. How could you let a woman beat you up, blah blah blah, and all that, kind of toxic thing that keeps men from vocalizing their abuse. Um, but yeah, no, I'm glad it does shine a light on the fact that, hey, mainstream media has always kept this narrative that, believe all women, right? We don't want to question that, because we don't. It's a very political subject, and if you speak up about it, you don't want to be outcast, I guess, for your
Mhm.
views in society, you know.
Mhm.
But when you talk about that, you're not taking anything away from the actual female victims that are, real victims of domestic violence. Not at all.
If anything, if anything, it's people who lie about it that are taking something away from
Yep.
people who are actually genuine victims.
Yep.
Because if nobody lied about it, no one would ever think that you were lying, because
Mm.
like no one would ever have seen that or experienced that. It's like, if no one, it's like there's a movie called The Invention of Lying, and this
Is that with
one
Ricky
scene there,
Gervais?
yeah, and he learns to lie,
Yeah.
and everyone just thinks he's telling the truth about everything.
Yeah, it's hilarious.
It is good.
But yeah, look, it's going to be interesting moving forward to see how, I guess, it, look, everyone on YouTube and everywhere you see, for the most part, are saying poor Johnny, blah blah blah. It will be
Mhm.
interesting to see how this is interpreted once the outcome, happens. Will there be a rise
Mhm.
in, the feminist movement being, this is unfair, this is not right, blah, blah, blah. He was abused, or he abused her just as much as she abused him, or whatever. Um, but yeah, I mean, his pain is very much real, especially when you listen to the audio and him saying that he literally tried to escape her, going through every room, locking every door.
Can you imagine that?
Mm,
Oh my god, I can't imagine you're trying to get away from someone, and you're like, you're doing what everyone says. You're leaving. Everyone says just leave the
mm,
room, and they follow you.
yeah.
That's the poor, and to be alone in that.
Mm,
Mm. Actually, I do want to say the one thing that, because when the allegations first came out about Johnny Depp, and the one thing that made me be like, I'm going to look into this, is his ex-partners kept coming out and saying, this is not fit with the description of the man that I know.
oh yes,
I've
I do remember that. Yeah, vaguely.
Yeah. multiple ex-partners said, I don't want to say she's lying, but that is not the man that I know. That is not what I experienced. And then one of Amber Heard's ex-partners came out and said, I experienced domestic abuse from Amber Heard. And I was like, I'm going to go Google this. I'm going to go look into this now. Because I think that's, you know, I think that's compelling testimony if your ex-partners come out and vehement, especially in such a public way.
Yeah.
Like where you're like, I'm gonna get a lot of backlash for this, and especially as a woman, you're supposed to support other women. You're supposed to be a part of the sisterhood, and you come out and you say, I don't like this. That's tough. That's really tough to do because it's like you're breaking girl code or letting the girls down or whatever. I've really felt that personally myself before.
Yeah.
So I can't imagine doing that in front of the whole world. I'd find it tough in like just a room full of people I know, let alone the whole world.
Yeah, I mean, when it all came out, it was kind of like the perfect storm, wasn't it? Because, like you said, it was around the Me Too movement and everything else. She was up and coming, and just, I mean, I dare say one of the worst things you can kind of label a person is like, you know, a domestic violence perpetrator, right? Especially a high-profile actor.
Yeah.
And like you said, it literally ruined his career, and he didn't get any other gigs afterwards. But yeah, she went straight for the jugular. So
she did.
Yeah.
She did.
Did you see that clip where her lawyer? Have you been watching those legal clips? They go for like hours long sometimes.
I have been like just putting them on the background line at work.
Yeah, they're very intriguing to watch. But there's this one hilarious, like people are awesome. Like they do compilations of like, you know, Johnny Depp being snarky or being funny. But there's the most recent one was Amber Heard's lawyer. He asked a question to I think it was the butler or the housekeeper or whatever. And then he objects to his, oh dear.
Yeah, he objects to his own question and says, that's his saying.
Oh God. Yeah, and the reaction of everyone watching and Johnny Depp is just, it's just comedy gold. But but this is, hey?
You go on.
No, but I was just going to say, this is like their stage, right? They're both actors and actresses in their own right. So this is like their stage to do, you know, hone their craft. They go on and they as on the witness stand and, you know, they give their piece and act out and cry and show their emotions and everything. So it's really interesting to see how Amber Heard will kind of play the emotional card and all that stuff. So
yeah, you know if she's going to testify? Because I don't think she has yet.
No, she hasn't. No, she hasn't sat on the stand yet. Surely she will at some point. And I'm sure the internet will rip her to shreds as the internet does. And pick at every point. But yeah, so far, nearly everyone's team Johnny.
I'm definitely team Johnny. Actually, yeah, a lot of people are team Johnny. Sorry, my cat has just walked into the room.
You're right.
Quite a vocal cat.
Hey, you found a local cat?
Very vocal. She's
vocal.
Okay.
Oh, that's all right.
So if she starts meowing, it will ruin your podcast.
Well, at least we know who she's rooting for. Team Johnny as well.
Yeah, she is.
Yeah, so yeah, it's going to be interesting moving forward and how this kind of shapes the domestic violence narrative. But I think, you know, in Australia at least, it's very politicized, right? A lot of funding goes to women's services, and look, rightly so. I'm not saying it shouldn't. I think I dare say statistics shows the bulk of victims are women, so nothing to, you know, not taking that away from anyone. Well, yeah, that's true too. Yeah, that's true too. A lot of men.
You know, I know a lot of men. A lot of men, and I don't know anyone who's ever reported it in any official capacity. I think the numbers that we have around the difference in gender in domestic violence are. I think if we actually properly surveyed men, I think a lot more would come forward. And there are some statistics. I was reading a report. I'll email it to you after if you want, just so you know, I'm not talking shit. That said,
I trust you.
that said that the majority of domestic violence goes both ways. So men abusing women and women abusing the man, it's gone two directions. But that the majority of it is actually initially perpetrated by the woman.
Right.
And then the men. So not to say that there aren't situations where men are just initially perpetrating, because obviously there are. I always have to reiterate that, because I know someone at some point is going to clip me and be like, she doesn't think that men.
Yeah, sure.
Of course I do.
Of course.
Of course I think they do. But this is really, I think we've moved into this point where in society where when it comes to abuse, where it's really easy to laugh about a man who's being abused by his female partner, and it's really easy to dismiss that.
Why do you think that's the case? Like, why do you think there's still that stigma? Or like, what is the stigma?
Because we put a lot of effort into protecting women in the past, 50, 60 years, and that's fantastic. As a woman, I reap the benefits of this. Thank you. Thank you to first and second, third wave feminism. Thank you to everything it's ever done for me. My life is significantly better than it would have been otherwise. But men got lost in that conversation, and we put all that effort in to break down the stigma around women who are being abused, and to not laugh at them and to not blame them. And we just didn't do that for men. In fact, I think what actually happened was the gap between men and women there, while the intentions were really good, it just got the gap between men and women got huge, because all of a sudden that created a narrative that men are perpetrators and women are victims. And so long as you have that kind of mold, sorry, there's cat hair going everywhere. You have that kind of mold. It's like saying, it's like if you saw, a dog flying. You're like, that's not right. That doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
It's just like it's hard to imagine a big, confident, toxic masculinity ridden man being abused by his sweet, Gentile, docile partner. Like, people think they've broken down these gender stereotypes, but they've actually just reinforced them so much more,
Why do you think men don't come forward, though? Do you think is there some fear of not being believed, or being called not a beta male, or like what is all of the above?
Yeah, we haven't created space for them to.
Because there's a couple of schools of thought, right? There's like toxic masculinity school of thought that you talk about, but then there's this other school of thought that says modern men are being very feminized now.
I don't necessarily love either of those schools.
No, me neither.
I just think, I think those people who talk about those things have been sitting in classroom too long. Like, stop trying to make it math. Stop trying to make it science. This is real life people. The reason men don't come forward today is the same reason that women didn't come forward 50 years ago. They don't think there's any help for them. It's literally that simple. If we started talking about men having issues and creating a space for men to say, I'm not okay.
Yep.
And if we allowed them to, like, if I have a lot of, reiterated many times, I have a lot of friends who have experienced abuse, both male and female. When I need to, and I know when I go and talk to a girl, if she's experienced abuse, I can just sit down with her and I can just have that conversation, because we as a society have already created this space where she already knows when I tell her, you don't have to put up with that. That's not okay.
Yep.
Like, she already knows. She's already prepared to. She already knows.
Yep.
Right? I need to respect when I go and talk to a man. He doesn't necessarily already know that. And I need to approach that conversation very differently than if I was talking to a girl. Not necessarily because of their, genitals, but because they have different experiences as men and women that have resulted in them expressing themselves different ways. I don't have any problem with men being feminine. I couldn't give a tit if men were feminine. Like, I don't give a shit what you are. Just be yourself. But, I think, so when people say, I can't even, this is just a minefield of nonsense. The reason men don't come forward is because there is nothing to suggest that they should. Like I said, there's no role models for men who are coming forward and saying that they're having these problems. There's no domestic violence shelters for men in Australia. There's one that's in Queensland. There's no funding for domestic violence shelters for men. Like every domestic violence ad you see says violence against women. Australia says no. No one is putting the message out there loudly and strongly. If you are a man and you are not okay and you are being hurt, call us. We're here. You know, it takes a village. If you want men to come forward, tell them that they can. Tell them, educate them about what emotional, mental, psychological abuse is. Because I can't tell you how many times I had to tell a dude. I literally do this thing with my friends who are guys. I say, can you just imagine if I said to you that my boyfriend, I don't have one, but imagine hypothetically I do, did to me exactly what you just said your girlfriend did. And they're like, oh, no, I'd tell you break up with him. I'd tell you get rid of that guy. I'm like, what? Why is it okay when he does it to you? Because you're a man and your testicles mean that you have like you're immune to abuse. What are you talking about? That's ridiculous.
No, it's like I agree with you. It's a lot about education, lack of education for men. Like, I dare say a lot of men don't have that emotional capacity to understand, or the emotional intelligence to kind of recognize what is, mental and emotional abuse. And then also, like, when it does dawn on them that they're going through it, who do they speak to? Where do they go? What services are available? What services are available? And
when I did start talking about men's issues, I already knew, I knew a couple guys, and then people started coming out of the woodwork just because they were like, oh my God, here's someone I can talk to who's not going to tell me that I, should just get over it, man up and stop being a pussy. Like, people just started coming out of the woodwork. I was like, this is ridiculous. This is so many men. And I just live in Victoria, Australia, and I've never been overseas. It's not like I have access to all these people. Like, I just have my small little bubble, and people just started reaching out.
Yeah. I feel like it's still going to be a very slow burn, right, for anything to change for men in this space. Because there's still that, very Australian masculine way that society perceives men to be. So that's always going to be perpetuated in some sense. But issues like this, Johnny Depp, and as we get more and more people raising their hand and bringing attention to it, then maybe things will change. But again, it's going to be a slow burn, especially when it's so politicized, right? Every election year there's going to be funding for women's domestic violence. And again, I agree with you, please don't take this clip out of context. There should be, if there are a lot of women that go through this, and statistics, like I said, show you've seen different statistics, then we can only go by the data and the facts. But we know that a lot of men also don't come forward as well. So it's it's really touchy subject, because I think it's recognized now, it's acknowledged and accepted that when you go to court for something, like, the man is always on the back foot, like, for especially in a domestic violence case. You're already behind the eight ball, because society and the system has kind of painted that narrative that men are the perpetrators and women are the victims. That's why I think I've worked with a lot of people who have just kind of blatantly told me that they feel like they've been hard done by, so they kind of give up. And they just roll with the punches, and they don't even fight for it anymore.
Exactly. That's the problem. They don't think that they don't think they can win. So why would you try? Wasted effort. And it's just heartbreaking. Breaks my heart.
Yeah. I mean, like, how many times have, police rolled up to a domestic incident and straight away just assume, females are the victims and everything else. Like, I'm sure a high majority of the times that they do roll up, it is the females. But then again, it shouldn't be just that narrative that is always the case.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, yeah, we'll see where it goes. Um, I don't know. I don't know where we go from here. I appreciate you coming on board and just having a chill chat.
That's my pleasure. Yeah, I think in regards to where it goes with men's issues, I think honestly, it's it feels like pissing into the wind, like trying to
Mm,
put out a forest fire with one bucket of water. Like
mm,
it's impossible. It's like, and the conclusion that I have come to is the best thing that I can do is be a voice, talk about it, and make sure that every man within reach of me knows that I will believe him if something has happened. He can come to me.
mm.
Um, so and that's the best thing that I can do. And you know, if what I would say, what I do wish for is that, and it's I really don't see it happening. What I do wish for is men who have experienced these things coming out more often,
Mm,
because that's the only way. And it's like that's such an awful thing to ask, I think, because it puts such pressure on men
mm.
to to step into a place that they shouldn't have to stand there. They shouldn't have to come forward and be visible in the light for people to believe that these things happen to them. But I think that's like until we have men coming forward, reporting it to police, going to the hospital, you know, and getting treated, so there's literally a record of what's happened, you know, coming forward to their friends and family, speaking up publicly. Until these things happen, people are not going to believe that this is a serious issue. Until people see it, they're not going to believe that it's real.
Mm,
And I mean, I wouldn't believe it was as big an issue as it is if I didn't know so many people personally.
mm.
You know, I would find it very hard to believe that it was as big an issue as it is if I didn't know so many people personally, if I didn't see it all the time.
Yeah.
So I think that's what needs to happen. Like,
Yeah. And you kind of just assume that it's happening more and more because women are getting greater rights, greater freedoms, gaining more independence as they, you know, prior to what they did, you know, 20, 30, 40 years ago, right? So
yeah, I mean, that's
with that
great.
great, yeah, and that's fantastic, but with that greater independence, with that greater power, with that greater, you know, part in society, then they have to take it from somewhere, and therefore, you know, it diminishes the male's capacity as well. So you would it's kind of like safe to recognize, yeah, of course, men are becoming victims of domestic violence now more so than ever as well because women now have greater powers, you know, and there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, it's interesting because I see where you're coming from, but I actually don't like the way you phrased
Yeah.
it, because I think like it's like the way I see it is like, in order for women to do well, men don't have to suffer. In
Mm.
order for men to do well, men don't have to suffer. No one has to cede ground. And Warren Farrell, I think, has this really great quote where he says, "One of us does not have to kneel for the other one to feel taller."
Yeah.
Like, there is absolutely no reason that women can't be in the workplace and, you know, have all their rights and be protected under the law and have complete autonomy and independence while men have the same thing, because
Mm.
really men and
Yes.
women are like we're not two different races. There's never been a time in life where we lived separately of each other.
Yeah.
We're like, we're the same tribe. Men and women are we are this we're a team. We're
Yeah.
two halves of one whole. So it's like there's no reason that we can't, you know, peacefully coexist equally.
Yeah.
Like that shouldn't be an issue. So it's like what I think does need to be addressed is, you know, with greater power, women have got more power
Mm.
today than they did 50, 60 years ago, comes more responsibility,
Yeah.
you know. And as a woman today, I have a voice now that I wouldn't have necessarily have had 50, 60 years ago.
Mm.
And it's my responsibility to use that voice to speak up for people who I feel
Yeah.
can't speak up. And it's kind of ironic that the people that I feel can't actually speak up are men at the
Mm.
moment. They can't say these things happen to me because they're like, well, that's an attack on women and feminism. And it's like, it's not.
Yeah.
It's not. Women can have issues alongside men having issues, and both of those issues can be equally important as each other.
Yeah. No doubt. Well said. Yeah, I didn't like the way I phrases that either. But yeah,
No,
of course we can both. Yeah, no, I agree. We can both coexist and both have the same rights, and equal opportunity and everything else. The cynic in me is just like there's too much tribal politics and too much identity politics to allow, both of us to, both genders, whatever you want to call it, to go up equally, and be both successful. But
Screw identity politics.
Yeah. Look, I agree, but look, I'm just afraid that that's the case, and
I think you're right. I think that is a huge issue, but I think that's exactly why people like you and me are talking on the internet, because we're like, this is ridiculous, right?
Yeah, this is ridiculous.
Being silly now, like, come on, let's be nice to one another. It's not that hard.
Yeah. It's not that hard, but not a lot of people, practice what they preach. So it's very unfortunate. But again, I work in that field where it's like I see mostly the negative side of I guess human nature. Where people have offended and done something wrong, and like I say, the cynic in me is just like, there's always going to be this tussle back and forth. I'm always going to hear stories, either side. So
yeah, I mean, the cynic in me 60 years ago would have said there's nothing. And they're not, and I wouldn't say that women in first world countries are oppressed now. Third world countries, yes, they're oppressed. Second world countries, yes, there are a lot of instances of oppression. First world countries, women are not oppressed.
Yeah.
And do we need to do a lot of work for people in second and third world countries? Yes. But the cynic in me would have told you that ground that's been made for women in the past 50, 60 years wouldn't have been possible. But history tells us that it was. So I have hope for men, and I have hope for men and women in all countries getting along.
That's right.
Didn't
Unified.
your mum ever tell you, if you don't have something nice to say, don't say it at all?
Yes,
that's
lost on in the area of social media when everyone has a megaphone at the touch of a keyboard. That doesn't work anymore. So even if you have nothing to say, type it out. Don't verbally say it. Do it in text.
If you have nothing nice to say to someone, make a Facebook status and say it to everybody.
Yeah, well, that's it. We'll use emoticons. Skip words.
Tweet about it now, I guess. People tweet. I don't really tweet.
Yeah, so that's the horrible thing too. But that's a different thing altogether. Everyone has a voice now, so it has its pros and cons, obviously. But yeah, it is what it is.
I mean, here's a pro. We're talking. And this is a pro.
Yeah.
Is everyone having something?
Well, that's literally the case, isn't it? Just like two random people that I just came across you, literally DM'd you and say, hey, do you want to do a podcast? And now we're sitting here talking. And maybe that's what people need to do, just have more civil discourse. But again, it's weird because the technology allows you to do that. But conversely, it's also making it a bit more toxic. So it's crazy.
It is crazy. But, I think so long as people like you and me are doing these podcasts, and like the same thing, I did the same thing. I saw a documentary on this a men's rights activist called Philip Tanzer. Found his email. I was like, hey, you want to come on my YouTube channel? And by some crazy thing, he said yes. So exactly the same thing. So it's like, there are positive conversations happening, and I always think I can't control what other people put out into the world, and I can't control what other people do, but I can do my absolute best to put the best I can out into the world. And I don't always get it 100% right, but do my best.
No,
and that's all anyone can do.
Well, yeah, and people having real conversations, and we're human. We get shit wrong. That's fine. We live and learn.
Exactly.
So,
100%.
Yeah, the problem is everyone judges though. That's the real shame. You're not allowed to be wrong anymore. So
it's just like I don't understand that either, because I'm like, You telling me you never made a mistake in your life? You never did something that you literally beat yourself up about for a month afterwards? Because I know that you have.
Mm.
Because everybody has. Like,
Yeah.
I literally said this to someone recently. They're like, I really like you, Gitta, because you don't judge me. And I'm like, well, I've made enough mistakes in my life not to judge anyone.
Yeah. Yeah, well, that's the problem. There's too many kind of self-righteous people out there who will judge everyone, and the the fear is that you can't make a mistake because someone will clip something or someone will screenshot something that you've said many moons ago, and the repercussions are just so significant now. So it's kind of a scary place.
I think people are cottoning on to this, though. I think people are starting to wake up to it because, you know, you're getting some people, but like people are like with Elon Musk buying Twitter, like he did that because he was like, stop censoring people.
Yeah.
Stop, he was like, free speech is important. And it's like, I think people are cottoning on to it about this clipping thing. I don't think that will be as prevalent or as like that's just a new tool in manipulator's tool belt. And I think the thing is, when society cottons on to, that's something they're doing, it stops being as useful as a tool. So I think people will continue to do it, but I don't think, I have faith in humanity that they're picking up on that.
Yeah.
They're like,
it's losing its impact.
I've seen you do this too many times and
Yeah.
found out that it was bullshit.
Yeah, cancel culture is like a very recent kind of phenomenon. And it's crazy because even people that are well established, like, I mean, the most obvious one, not the obvious, but the one that comes to mind is when, what's that guy, the comedian Hart? What's his name? Something Hart? Kevin Hart. I don't know why his name just disappeared out of my brain. But he was meant to host whatever it was, the Oscars or whatever it was. And because he said something about, gay people, like he lost a gig. But everyone knows, and also Joe Rogan, right? Because he used the N-word, everyone's just like, oh, he's racist. But it's like he's got hundreds of thousands of hours that you can shift through. And he's not that person. But still, there's people out there that will try to reframe the narrative and try to, like, get him cancelled. It's like, why?
There is some kind of like, when I see people doing this, I'm like, it's like, there are some people who they just want to nail someone to the wall just to see the nail there. They don't care about having people who are actually bad people or whoever the person is who responsible is. They just want to nail someone to the wall because it makes them feel, superior, like morally superior.
Yep.
Like it's
virtue signaling.
It's really shitty. It's like the least attractive or likable quality in a person ever, and it's really running rampant in this cancel culture nonsense.
Yeah.
But then the other thing that gives me faith in humanity is if cancel culture actually worked, Kevin Hart wouldn't be working right now. And he's still making movies, he's still going to comedy shows. So yes, when these firestorms start on the internet, on social media, they really ramp up.
Yep.
Joe Rogan's still got his podcast. Kevin Hart is still, making movies. Dave Chappelle, he's going to be fine. Like, all of these people who get cancelled, it lasts like there's a big thing and everyone's tweeting about it, but it's like, does anyone really give a shit? Like, most people in the world don't actually give a shit. They're just going on with their lives and they're going to go watch the movies. They don't give a fuck.
I feel like also because it's such a touchy subject, or because society makes using the N-word such a touchy subject that you're expected to like condemn it from in society. You're meant to, even though secretly you think like, oh, it's fine, he has black friends, he's not that way, we know he's not a racist, but the external perception is you have to condemn it. So a lot of people just give that impression that, oh yeah, what he said was wrong, but secretly they still support him. They just have to present that facade.
Yeah, 100%. And this is across like almost all areas, feminism, racism, LGBT. It's across all areas. There is this pressure to conform to that thinking. And it's like, I have spoken out about men's issues for quite a while now, and there was this funny thing that happened where some people just like stopped talking to me, and then some people like privately to me were like, yeah, I really support what you're doing. Publicly, I'm never gonna
Yes.
say that,
Yes.
because that's like, that I have got messages from people being like, I have never seen someone with so many balls get up like that. Like, that's really brave of you to say, but like, if anyone asks me what I think about it, FYI, I'm gonna pretend that I think you're crazy.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm like, you know what? Like, I understand. Like, I don't necessarily respect it, but
Mm.
I understand the pressure.
No, yeah, exactly. No, I understand it too because, they have, if they were to support you or agree with you or whatever publicly, then they're putting at risk whatever, their job, their reputation, So I
Exactly.
totally understand they're caught between a rock and a hard place. So
Yeah, and I mean, when I started doing it, I literally called up a friend and was like, I think I'm going to talk about this. I think I'm going to lose some friends because it's a controversial thing to say. And I live in Victoria, and Victoria is a very left-wing state, so it's
mm,
going to be controversial. And they just kind of said, if you lose friends because you're saying you care about something bad that is happening,
mm,
are they really your friends? And I was like, excellent point.
mm.
Noted. I'll do it. Thank you for that pep talk.
Yeah, yeah. No, there's a lot of truth to that, right? They're never meant to be your friend is anyway if they don't respect your opinion, especially if it's
Yeah, and
valid.
it's like I respect that their opinion is different.
Hmm.
Like I knew they didn't agree with me. There wasn't a reason for me not to be friends with them. So
Yeah, and again, like we said, that's the missing link that people
yeah,
can't just sit down across from each other, have different opinions, and still be civil about it and have a chat. So
yeah,
that's where we're at.
it's toxic. It's toxic.
Mm,
It's really sad.
yeah. I think it'll get better though. You know.
I think it has to. I think it has to because otherwise, oh hello. I think it has to. Otherwise, like, where can we go? Like, if
Well,
we
that's
don't
it.
start talking to each other, if we don't start listening to each other more, you know, like, where can you go after that if you continue to like, at some point, you've got to turn around and realize this ain't it.
Yeah.
Like, you've got to,
But in
because
saying
otherwise,
that, like the tribal politics and the identity politics have never been this intense ever. So it is because of the advent and the of technology and the capabilities that the technology has given us. It's we both agree that surely has to get better. But thus far, it's actually created those pockets, those tribal kind of, groups. So I hope so. Mm, yeah.
I hope so
Where else are we gonna
too.
go?
I'm going to, I'm running away to the country. I'm gonna go rural, where 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 people forget half the vowels of their words and don't care about any of this.
Yeah, yeah. Ignorance is bliss sometimes, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, just don't deal with all the dramas of the world. It's like the more you know, the more technology allows you to research and understand what's happening in the world, the more horrible it actually is. Or maybe I'm
Yeah.
just the eternal pessimist in me.
No, you're 100% right. I've said this many times. Sometimes I wish that I was oblivious. You know, those
Mm,
people who are just really oblivious to everything.
mm.
You know, they don't realize when someone in the room is mad at them because they don't pick up on social
Yep.
cues. They don't
Yeah.
know about what's happening in the world. The only thing that they know is that, Kim Kardashian is dating Pete Davidson, and that's the most exciting thing that happened this week.
Yep.
And you're like, sometimes I really wish I could just be you. Like,
Yeah,
life
no.
seems less stressful.
100%. I agree with you. Sometimes I would love to be that person that just
My God,
doesn't
that
need to
seems fun.
know all the ails of the world, all the ills of the world. I just,
Seriously. They're just like, what am I having for dinner?
yes, especially those people that you said don't pick up on social cues. They're the best.
I know, I love it. I love it. I watch them and I'm like, stop talking. And then just, no,
But good on
love
them.
it.
Good on them. Just living their own
They're
life.
just chilling. They don't care.
Yeah, yeah. What freedom it is. But yeah,
Bliss. Will be bliss.
I know we analyze and just think too much. But again, the benefits of that, swinging all the way back to childhood trauma, is that we do have the ability to kind of have that insight and do that self-reflection and improve ourselves and develop ourselves as people, because we can do that,
Yeah.
you know.
If I was oblivious, I probably wouldn't have dealt as well
Yeah. Yeah.
my childhood or my adulthood. So excellent point. Now I'm glad that I'm not oblivious.
No, it's good. It's been fantastic. Well, look, I appreciate you coming on. It's been a good solid hour. So
Yes.
I appreciate, yeah, your time and everything that you're doing. I will link, your socials down below if anyone wants to check you out. But yeah, keep fighting the good fight.
You too, man. You too. Keep it up.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. All right, that's the end. We'll catch everyone later.